Welcome back. Today I'm sitting in my sewing room trying to make some decisions about a quilt that I'm working on. This particular quilt is a English paper pieced double wedding ring quilt. And what I chose to do on this particular quilt was to make the arcs and the rings out of English paper piecing. You can see it here. Using the little tiny pieces, and we've talked about this on other episodes, how to construct these and how to assemble them. And then once I assembled all the arcs and rings, then I appliqued the design, the whole design, onto a single piece of fabric to serve as the background for the quilt. There are some distinct advantages of doing it this way. There are also some disadvantages that I learned in working through this. Primarily, it's very easy to assemble the rings and the arcs. However, it is more difficult to position all of these designs onto the single piece of fabric, get everything lined up so it's straight and it's square and it works out appropriately. So you might want to consider that if you do it. My challenge today and what I'm working through is how to make it bigger. I only had enough pieces to put together a 7 ring by 7 ring top. And while that will cover the top of a queen size bed, it does not allow very much to go down the sides and the foot of the bed. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make it larger without interrupting the flow of the eye on the design. You can bind this quilt right at the edge of the arcs. You could applique it onto a different fabric so that it looked like the rings were sitting onto a border of a different fabric. You could put individual borders on it to make it bigger. Now that's the easiest way to go, one of those two, either to applique it onto a wide border or put several borders onto it. But I've worked really hard on this and I wanted to do something that kind of made it special and unique. So what I did was I took a light box, I used this particular one, and I laid out the edge of the quilt over the top of the light box. And I sketched out the design of how the arcs flow and then started playing with how did I want to do this. And what I decided was I wanted to emphasize the little triangle that was designed where the arcs meet. It's the only place in this top where this particular fabric is used. And you can see right here how those come together in a 3-piece design. So I started playing with it, and what I did was I took one little, it's almost like a little diamond shape. It's got a little bit of a curve here in the end that makes it a little more pointed on this end than this end. And I started playing around. Now if you were to put them together, it would fall right up there like that. But what my desire is to make this wider. So when I put a border on, the design comes down further in that corner and pulls the eye out. So I played with it going this way, like it was a new design, and then possibly adding some more pieces to either make the 3-piece or the 4-piece back there. But that just didn't look like it was right. So what I decided to go with was a design where that 4th piece looks like it has just dropped down. It's only about 1 inch from the intersection of the 3 down to that 4th piece, but it allows to draw the eye down, to draw the whole design down. So if I do decide to put a straight border or borders on, at least the design doesn't come up and go down quite as much as it would without it. So once I sketched this out and knew what I wanted to do and what it was probably going to look like, the next step was to make more pieces. And that's what I've been doing here today, is putting together some pieces to stitch to get ready to put onto the quilt. So I've got a few ready. I've got them all pressed up. And then I came to the ironing board, because that was the best place to press it and put it in place. And for something as large as this too, that might help you because you've got a little bit more space to work with. But any place you have would work fine. And then I laid out that fourth piece onto the quilt top using a ruler to make sure that they're all in the same spot. They're exactly 1 inch down, and the top of the diamond lays right at the intersection of those two lines. So at this point, I've put 3 or 4 on, pinned them into place. I'm going to stitch these to applique them to the quilt, and then I'll step back and reevaluate what I've done. I'm also in the process of buying more fabric to be able to put a border, because my initial thought process was to use the pink, which is this fabric, and just create a little border. But mattresses these days tend to be thicker than they were even 20, 30 years ago, much less the time that many of these quilts were designed. So we need a little bit bigger quilt than you might think from a quilt pattern or a quilt book that you're getting these from. So keep that in mind. Your mattresses can be almost 18 inches tall. So instead of a mattress 50 years ago might have been 5, 6 inches tall, now you're 18 inches tall. So the drop on the sides of those mattresses for your quilt needs to be a little bit longer to, number one, cover the mattress and the sheet, and number two, keep you covered up when you're in the bed. Because as you can think about it, if that little top is only coming over this far, one good turn over and you've uncovered yourself. So if you're going to use these in a practical manner, you're going to need to take that into consideration. So that's where we are today. I'm thinking that I'm going shopping for fabric again. I went out yesterday and didn't have any luck. These fabrics are a tad, they're pastel, but they're a tad on the neon side. They're very vivid, and it looks good, in my opinion, as the pattern and used in little pieces. But to get bigger pieces that you would use for a border, I think you have to be a little careful, because it'll get a little cartoony if it's too vivid. We want to come somewhere in between that traditional calico, traditional little delicate baby type pattern to something a little bit more modern with a little bit more vibrancy in the colors, but not so much that we step just one step too far. So that's where I am on this project. We'll be visiting it from time to time, try to make some little short videos to tell you what's going on, maybe give you some tips and show you how I'm doing my quilts. And as always, these are just my ideas and what works for me. If you have something that works better for you, by all means do it, because it's your quilt and it's for your pleasure in creating it and enjoying it after the fact. So do keep that in mind, and I'll see you next time.